For more on the Boao Forum, I'm joined by Yan Liang, a professor of economics at Willamette University. Good to see you again. A lot of these issues are not new to Asia. The Boao Forum, obviously a very strong regional group that's focused on solving problems there. I was surprised to hear about supply chains again at a time when we thought we had sort of, I guess, solved that problem post-COVID, that things were getting back to normal. And I guess my question for you is, from the folks that you're talking to on the ground there, how big of an issue is resolving the supply chain problem, and help us understand how that's going to help the global economy?
Yeah, good to talk to you, Phil. So I think the supply chain has remained a very important issue because we all know that, Asian economies, they enjoy a lot of, heterogeneity between the different economies. They have, high-tech industries, but they also have, relatively lower value-added assembly manufacturing. So these countries also have very high level of complementarity between their economies. So that really helped to solidify and strengthen the supply chain, the division of labor, so to speak. But I think as countries develop and as they grow, they all need to upgrade. They all wanted to, climb up the value-added ladder. Not to mention, right now with the U.S.-China trade war and tech war, I think many countries felt that they are somehow sit in between the two countries, and they don't want to pick and choose. So they will need to navigate through how to reorganize, how to reshuffle that supply chain sort of division of labor in order to, maximize the efficiency and also build that resiliency, which I think is very important as a lesson taught by the COVID.
If you're representing one of the countries in the Boao Forum, you're kind of stuck between China and the U.S., right? Because obviously they do a ton of business with China, but most likely they also do a ton of business with the U.S. So they're also drafting that fine line of really working with all parties because they want to conduct business. The Bank of China president was talking a little bit about financing. And what are the issues when it comes to financing? Do these countries, and I assume they do, but what is their challenges in getting financing for their infrastructure projects or their domestic private sector projects?
Right. I think that's a great question. And I think that is where, I think China plays a very vital role in here. As we all know, through BRI, China has invested heavily in many of these East Asian emerging markets in terms of, their transport sector, their logistics, the energy and utility sectors. Those are the sectors that receive a lot of the Chinese outward investments. And I think the Bank of China's director also talked about, a lot of the small and medium-sized enterprises are also facing that financing constraint. So I think China's, domestic banks like the Development Bank, but also, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, and also the China New Development Bank, all these, they have very strong, very high level of financing power, and they're willing to go out and invest in many of these countries to build infrastructure, to build a connectivity, to build these, trade and other facilities. So I think this is very important as China continue to, invest, building that connections and help to, strengthen that supply chain and help to really strengthen that production network.
Is there a danger that if we're always using debt to finance new investments, and I know historically that's been the case, but that's also how we've gotten a number of issues, right, where people overextend themselves and over-leverage themselves, whether it's in Asia or in the U.S. or in Europe. What can be done to make sure that it's a healthy amount of leverage that gets to the prosperity that's needed for these investments, but at the same time protecting the investors, be it whether it's China or another sovereign wealth fund or a private bank for that matter?
Right. I think that's a great question. I think what is important, first of all, is to debunk this whole idea of debt diplomacy for China, or debt trap, right? So for China, it's not in its interest, right, to trying to get these countries into debt trap. And I believe, many of these banks, they exercise due diligence. They, really make sure that some of the projects are bankable, that they are going to generate these long-term returns, even though, yes, some of these infrastructure projects are going to take long-term to bear fruits. That said, I think it's also up to the recipient countries. These countries also need to exercise due diligence to really think about what projects will really benefit their own economies in the long term. And I think, healthy competition in the global financing scheme would also be very helpful because, we not only have the World Bank, the IMF, AIIB, Asian Development Bank, and many of these banks could, compete to, provide the best deals and, strengthen the surveillance and transparency and monitoring for their loan projects. And so I think all of these are very important to really maintain that financial sustainability.
Yan, we could talk for a very long time on how to find good projects to invest in anywhere in the world, for that matter. But we're out of time. Appreciate your time, Professor. See you soon.
Thank you.